"Don't embarrass me," my son says through a smile that's only for the cameras. His fingers pinch my shoulder like a warning. "Sit in the kitchen, please." He's gone before I can answer, swallowed by applause and the white shimmer of his new life. The orchestra swells. A chandelier hums with warm light. A photographer's flash pops, catching the clean angles of his tux and the soft curve of the bride's veil. I stand there a second too long, a man blocking the service lane, until a server swinging through the door murmurs, "Excuse me, sir," and the smell of roasted garlic and hot pans pushes me the way my son just did, back, away, out of frame. My name is Charles. I'm 72 years old. I used to pull 10-hour shifts with steel and sweat and men who measured respect by whether you showed up when it hurt. These hands, scarred, stubborn, have tightened bolts, changed brake pads, and once carved a treehouse ladder from scrap wood so a boy could climb higher than we ever could afford to. They learned the weight of a feverish forehead at 2 a.m., the balance of a bicycle seat when little legs wobbled, the give of a cheap suit shoulder when I fixed a torn seam before graduation. I have not learned until tonight what it is to be told to sit in a kitchen at your own son's wedding. A young server, barely older than the summer help I used to hire for the shop, catches my hesitation. "You can wait in here until toast, sir," she says, kind, in the way people are when they didn't cause the bruise, but can see it. She pulls out a metal chair near a stack of hotel pans. It wobbles. I sit anyway. The kitchen is a different universe. Stainless steel, steam ghosts, timers chirping like crickets. Chefs move with that quick, efficient grace people only have when they're too busy to look important. "Behind," someone says, sliding a tray past my knee. A bell dings. Butter hisses. The door swings open and shut on its porthole window, and each time it opens I catch a slice of the world I paid for, but don't belong to tonight. Crystal flutes lined like soldiers, roses set into towers, a champagne pyramid lit from within, like a magician's trick. My son is a clean silhouette at the head table, grinning toward his in-laws. I raise that jawline. He doesn't look left. I pull an envelope from my inside pocket. It's bent from the press of my jacket. Inside, a check that should have gone toward patching the roof before winter, a photo of him with a gap-toothed smile and grass stains, and a letter I wrote in blocky pen. "Proud of you. Always have been. Always will be." I fold the flap down and run a thumb along the edge. The paper is thin. My throat is not. When the door flaps, music leaks through. Distant, expensive. The band is playing something that sounds like the inside of a jewelry box. I remember another kind of music, the rattle of an old pickup I kept running with duct tape and prayer, the scrape of boots across the front steps after a double shift, the whisper of a library card sliding across a counter when I told the boy, "Books will carry you further than this town." I remember the way he fell asleep in the back office of the shop, curled in a jacket, a socket wrench for a toy. I remember thinking, I'm building something here, a life where he won't have to be ashamed of where he came from. I didn't know shame could learn to speak in his voice. Through the porthole, the bride glides into view, lace, satin, and something steady in her gaze. She leans toward a bridesmaid, listening, then nods like she's reached a decision. For a heartbeat, she turns, past the glitter and the cameras and the careful smiles, and looks straight toward the kitchen door. Not past it, through me. It's a small thing, a look, but it reaches places applause can't. I look away first. The young server with a dragonfly tattoo balances a tray of lamb and potatoes and pauses by my chair. "You okay here?" she asks, not like a script, but like she means it. "I'm fine," I say. It's the kind of lie fathers are trained to tell so other people can keep moving. She nods and disappears into the ballroom brightness. The chair wobbles under me, and every shake answers back with a memory. The soccer cleats I bought second-hand and scrubbed like they were new. The day we toured a college campus, and he walked 3 steps ahead, embarrassed by my old coat. The graduation ceremony where he waved without turning fully around. The call when he got his job offer and said, "We did it, Dad." And I believed the we. Maybe that's on me. Maybe I wanted the we so badly I didn't hear it thinning out. A bell dings again. "Fire table 4, someone calls. The door swings open. I catch a sliver of the head table. There's a crown of peonies above a runner of candles. My son raises his glass for a test sip, practices the face he thinks looks like gratitude. He learned that face in mirrors I paid for. He learned it well. 5 to speeches, the maitre d' announces as he slices through the steam, metronome precise. Pans are wiped, herbs flicked just so. Out beyond the door, the music softens, as if the room is leaning in. The dragonfly server passes again and glances at the envelope in my hand. "That for him?" she asks. "It was," I say before I can help it. She gives me a wince of solidarity and keeps moving. There's a silence that mothers know, and fathers too. The kind you swallow because calling out truth would cost a child more than you want them to pay. It tastes like pennies and old coffee. I've swallowed that silence when he rolled his eyes at my work jacket, when he warned me not to sound too small town at orientation, when he asked me to wait by the side doors after his promotion party because his boss's parents were there. Tonight the silence has teeth. The music drops. A fork taps. Crystal. It rings across money and flowers. The bride stands, a microphone in her hand, shoulders squared like someone about to carry a weight she chose on purpose. The room turns into a field of faces tilted toward her. In the porthole circle, my son's smile dims half a shade. He tilts his chair back the tiniest bit, as if distance could protect him from whatever is coming. "Before we begin the toasts," she says, voice clean enough to cut, "there's something I need to say." A ripple moves through the guests, expectant, entertained, unaware of how quickly air can thin in a room like this. The bride doesn't perform a smile. She doesn't tremble. Her gaze skims the tables and returns to where it started. To me, it's not pity, it's not theatrics. It is recognition, a hand reaching into the dark corners where families push the things they don't want photographed. My hand tightens around the envelope until the paper creases. I feel the cheap stock give under my thumb and think absurdly. Roofs leak when paper gets wet. The brain goes where it goes to keep a man from breaking. Somewhere behind me a timer shrieks. A cook curses softly. A pan is pulled off flame. The door swings, the circle of the world opens, and I see my son's shoulders go rigid. He glances toward the kitchen, not at me exactly, at the idea of me, the problem behind the door. He raises his glass a fraction, ready to interrupt. He has always trusted volume. The bride lifts her chin a notch. Her free hand settles over her stomach, steadying herself or the room, I can't tell which. She looks like she might have been nervous earlier and then walked past it. "Tonight is about truth," she says, "the kind that belongs in the light." Someone laughs in the wrong place and gets elbowed into silence. The chandeliers hum. A camera light blinks red. As I sit in a kitchen that smells like rosemary and flame, and learn how small a man can feel in a house he helped pay for. There is a line between being quiet and being invisible. I have lived on the quiet side of it for most of my life, because working men know you get farther when you keep your head down and let your hands speak. But as the bride's words gather themselves, as the room's attention leans toward her like wheat toward weather, I understand I have crossed into other territory without noticing. Invisible is not quiet. Invisible is erased. The bride draws a breath that feels like a page turning. On my lap, The envelope lifts with my own. I sit up as straight as a man can who has carried engines and grief and the last of his pride to this chair. Through the porthole, she looks at me one more time and nods so slightly no one would see it unless they were waiting their whole life to be seen. Whatever she is about to say, I know this much. When the door swings closed again, I will not be the same man on this chair, and when it opens, neither will my son. When you're a father, you don't picture this. You picture standing tall at your son's side, maybe a hand on his shoulder as he greets his new life, pride so heavy in your chest it almost hurts. You don't picture being tucked into a kitchen with the smell of dishwater and grease, as though your whole life has been something to rinse away. But maybe the truth is, this moment didn't begin tonight. It began years ago. My son didn't arrive in the world with wealth or advantage. He arrived in my arms on a rainy Tuesday, red-faced and howling, his mother exhausted but smiling. We were young, too young maybe, but determined. I had calluses on my hands from factory work and a head full of promises I meant to keep. I told myself I would give him more than I had, a better life, a wider horizon. And so I did what fathers do. I worked. Long days, longer nights. I fixed cars in the driveway for extra cash. I mowed lawns when the factory cut our hours. I traded sleep for shifts and comfort for scraped knuckles. My wife used to laugh and say, "Charles, one day you'll work yourself into the ground." And I'd answer, "If the ground means he rises, then so be it." When he was 6, I taught him to ride a bike in the church parking lot. He fell, scraped his knee, cried, then climbed back on. "Don't let go, Dad," he said. So I ran alongside him, knees burning, until the moment came when he was pedaling alone, shouting, "Look at me!" That's what parenthood is, letting go, even when you want to hold on forever. When he was 10, he wanted to play soccer. We couldn't afford the uniform. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, bills spread out like accusations, wondering what I could cut. The roof leaked. The fridge hummed like it might die. But I found a way. I patched tires for neighbors, sold an old guitar I'd kept since high school. And when he ran onto the field in that uniform, his smile made every sacrifice feel small. High school came. He grew taller than me, shoulders broad, voice deeper. He also grew quieter. I'd come home, grease still under my nails, eager to hear about his day. He'd shrug, mutter, "Fine," and disappear to his room. I told myself it was just adolescence, that wall sons build when they're trying to become men. I thought it would pass. College was where I first heard it in his voice. Shame. We were walking across campus for orientation, and I was talking too loudly, I guess. My accent still carried the grit of factory floors and back porches. He leaned close and whispered, "Dad, can you not talk so much? People are looking." It cut, but I smiled and said nothing. Because that's what I did, kept silent so he could move without weight. I worked extra shifts to help cover what the scholarships didn't. Sometimes I skipped meals so I could send him a little extra for books. And when he graduated, I sat in the crowd, clapping until my hands ached, telling anyone who would listen, "That's my boy." He didn't look for me in the audience, but I convinced myself he didn't need to. He knew I was there. But the signs stacked up. The times he didn't introduce me to his friends, the times he told me to dress nicer when I came to visit, the way his voice softened when he spoke to others but sharpened when he spoke to me. Each moment was a chip, small enough that I told myself it didn't matter. But a lifetime of chips can hollow a man out. And now, here I was sitting in the back of a kitchen, watching through a porthole while my son, my boy who once clutched my hand at county fairs, who once fell asleep on my chest, told a ballroom full of people I was too much of an embarrassment to be seen. I thought of his mother then. She'd passed years ago, cancer stealing her before her time. She would have known what to say tonight. She had a way of balancing fire with softness. She would have looked our son in the eyes and reminded him of everything we gave. But all I had were my hands, my silence, and an envelope I suddenly wasn't sure I should give. Through the doorway, the bride lifted the microphone, her eyes sweeping the room before pausing on me again. It wasn't pity in her gaze, it was acknowledgement. And in that glance, memories pressed in. The soccer field, the scraped knees, the graduation stage, all of it leading here to a kitchen chair wobbling under my weight. The chef beside me cursed as the sauce boiled over. The smell of seared lamb filled the air. And still, all I could hear were his words, echoing louder than the clatter of pans. Sit in the kitchen. Sacrifice was supposed to build bridges, but tonight it had built walls, and I was on the wrong side of them. I sat straighter, folding the envelope back into my jacket. If my son thought hiding me would make him look bigger, then tonight would show him something else. The truth has a way of finding the light, no matter how deep you bury it. And as the bride drew breath to speak, I braced myself, because I knew something was coming that no one at that head table had prepared for. The clink of crystal against silverware rang like a bell calling judgment. Conversation stilled. Laughter caught in throats. Even the band fell into silence, bows lifted from strings, fingers frozen above keys. All eyes turned toward the head table, where the bride stood, tall, poised, the microphone trembling slightly in her hand, but her gaze steady as steel. I watched her from the kitchen's porthole window, the little circle that separated me from the glitter of the ballroom. She wasn't smiling. Not the polite smile brides are coached to wear. The one that says everything is perfect, even when the cake collapsed backstage. Number. She wore the look of someone about to lift a stone from her chest and set it on the table for all to see. My husband, she began, her voice clear and caring, asked me to give a toast tonight. There were chuckles, the kind that float across tables when everyone expects the same tired jokes and platitudes. How we met, how much I love him, how lucky we are. My son leaned back in his chair, that broad grin plastered on his face, the grin he'd practiced in bathroom mirrors since he was a boy. He didn't see what I saw. He didn't see her hands gripping the mic like a woman holding the last truth she could bear. But before I thank anyone else, she continued, there's someone missing from this table. The room rippled with confusion. Guests glanced at one another, heads tilting like birds. My son's smile stiffened, just a fraction. His hand twitched on the tablecloth. A napkin crumpled in his fist. This man, she said, tilting her chin toward him, didn't arrive here on his own. He was carried by someone who worked harder than anyone in this room will ever know. Someone who gave and gave until there was nothing left. Someone who deserved a place of honor tonight, and instead was asked to sit in the kitchen. The words cracked like a whip across the hall. The hum of the chandelier seemed to falter. Glasses lowered. Forks stilled. People turned, almost in unison, toward the kitchen doors, toward me. I froze in my chair, my jacket heavy with the envelope pressed to my chest. A gasp broke the silence. An aunt covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "She can't mean..." But she did. My son shot up from his chair, grabbing at the mic. "That's enough," he hissed, his voice cutting through the speakers. The grin was gone, replaced with panic painted in streaks of sweat. "You don't know what you're talking about." The bride pulled the mic close, not letting go. Her eyes, bright, unflinching, never left mine through that tiny circle in the door. "Number, everyone here deserves to know the truth. They deserve to know the kind of man you chose to be tonight." Her voice rose, filling the hall. "You built your future on the back of a man who never stopped sacrificing for you. He patched the roof instead of buying himself a coat. He skipped meals so you could have books. He clapped until his hands bled at your graduation. And how did you repay him? By telling him to hide, to sit in the kitchen, so you wouldn't be embarrassed." The hall buzzed with murmurs, a hive of disbelief and outrage. I heard my name whispered in waves. The father, his dad. "He's here," like a tide rising toward the shore. My son's face flushed crimson. He lunged again, trying to wrestle the microphone away. "Stop this. You're ruining everything." His voice cracked, desperate now, like a child caught in a lie. But she didn't flinch. She turned her back on him, lifting her glass instead. "I won't raise my life beside a man who hides his own father. So tonight, I'll make the toast he should have made." She raised the glass high, and her voice carried, like a bell, to the man who gave everything so this day could exist, to the father of the groom. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, clink. One guest stood, glass lifted, then another, and another, until the sound was everywhere, crystal striking crystal, the murmur swelling into a chant that shook the room. "To the father of the groom." I sat frozen, my throat thick, vision blurring. My hands trembled on the envelope. The dragonfly-tattooed server near me whispered, "That's you, sir. They're talking about you." My son's voice cut across the cheers, hoarse and wild. "Sit down, all of you. This is my wedding, not his pity parade." He slammed his glass so hard the stem snapped, wine bleeding across the white linen like an open wound. But the people didn't stop. Their eyes turned from him to me through the porthole, searching, acknowledging. For the first time in years, I was not invisible. I rose slowly from the chair, the metal legs scraping against the tile. My knees wavered, but my back held straight. I pressed the envelope against my chest, as if to keep my heart from breaking open. And in that moment, standing in the half-light of the kitchen while the ballroom roared with recognition, I understood something simple and fierce. He could banish me to the shadows, but the truth had already stepped into the light, and nothing he did could stuff it back into the dark again. The sound of crystal striking crystal still rang in the air when the bride lowered her glass. The chant, "To the father of the groom," settled into whispers, but the damage was done. A room that had been my son's stage only minutes ago now looked at him with something else entirely: judgment. From my place behind the kitchen door, I could see it written on their faces. An uncle shook his head, lips tight with disgust. One of the bride's cousins leaned toward another guest, whispering furiously. Even the best man's smile had cracked, slipping into something uneasy. Respect, the thing my son had been clawing at all his life, was gone. Not because of me, because of him. He shot to his feet, knocking his chair back so hard it nearly toppled. "Enough!" he barked, his voice raw, desperation bleeding through. "This is my wedding, not some sob story. Sit down!" But the room didn't move. No one sat. No one even raised a hand in his defense. The bride didn't flinch. She set the microphone carefully on the head table, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. Then she sat, her glass still lifted, her gaze turned away from him as though he were no longer the man she had married just hours ago. My son's chest heaved, eyes darting across the room, searching for an ally. His new in-laws sat stiff, their faces pinched with humiliation. His groomsmen stared into their glasses. Even his childhood friends avoided his eyes, ashamed. That was when it hit him. He was alone. I felt it through the door, the way a father knows the moment his son realizes he's lost control. And for a flicker of a second, I thought he'd turn toward me, thought he'd find me through the crowd, finally see the man who had given everything for him. But he didn't. He only saw enemies. I rose from my chair, the metal legs scraping against tile. The dragonfly-tattooed server glanced at me, her eyes wide, as if to ask what I was going to do. I didn't know myself. My knees trembled, but my back straightened with each step. The door swung open, and I stepped into the light. The ballroom stilled. Conversations died mid-breath. The clink of silverware against plates froze. All those eyes, hundreds of them, shifted from my son to me. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The envelope in my hand, creased and bent, was testimony enough. I walked past tables lined with roses, past guests whispering into their napkins, past my son standing rigid and pale. His jaw clenched so tight it looked like his teeth might crack. I met his eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't look away. I stopped beside the head table, set the envelope down in front of him. His hand twitched as though he might grab it, tear it open, shred it to pieces. But he didn't. He just stared at it, chest heaving, his face a storm of rage and shame. "I didn't come here to ruin anything," I said, my voice low but steady, carrying across the silence. "I came to watch my son get married." I let the words linger, the weight of them sinking into every corner of the room. "But you made sure I wasn't invited to the table." I turned, scanning the hall one last time. The guests, the chandeliers, the flowers, every detail paid for by sacrifices that had chipped away at my life. I had built this moment, and yet I was the one asked to hide. "Enjoy your night," I said quietly. "It's yours now." And with that, I walked away. Behind me, murmurs swelled like a tide. Some voices soft with pity, others sharp with anger. I heard the bride's glass clink against the table as she set it down, but she didn't speak. "Not yet." My son's voice cracked through the noise, furious. "You think you've won? You think this makes you look noble?" His words followed me toward the doors, hot and bitter. "You'll regret this, old man. You'll regret it when no one's around to take care of you." But I didn't turn back. Not once. The doors swung shut behind me, and the noise of the ballroom dulled to a distant roar. I walked through the hotel lobby, past guests arriving late, past staff carrying trays. Their eyes followed me, some curious, some knowing. Outside, the night was cool. The air smelled of rain on pavement, clean and sharp. I inhaled deeply, letting it fill me, washed the smoke of shame from my lungs. For the first time in years, I felt taller than my own shadow. I hailed a cab, climbed inside, and didn't look back at the glow of the hall as it shrank in the rearview mirror. That night I left my son to his wedding, to his choices, to the silence that comes when truth finally finds a voice. And I carried with me not regret, but a strange, quiet peace, because whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I had stood. I had not hidden. And that mattered more than any toast or table ever could. The cab dropped me at my house a little past midnight. The street was dark, porches empty, the kind of quiet that wraps around you like an old coat. I paid the driver, pressed a thank you into his hand, and stood for a moment under the weak glow of the porch light. My house looked the same as it had that morning. A sagging step, a shutter in need of paint, the welcome mat worn thin from years of coming and going. But I didn't feel the same. Something had shifted inside me, like a hinge unstuck. I unlocked the door and stepped into silence. The kind of silence that can either be companion or tormentor. Tonight, it was both. I set my jacket over the chair, laid the envelope on the table, and just stared at it. That paper had been meant for my son, for the boy who used to clutch my hand crossing streets, who used to call me the strongest man alive. Instead, it sat unopened, a relic of love I wasn't sure had a place anymore. I brewed coffee out of habit, the familiar sound of the pot gurgling in the quiet kitchen. I took it black, the way I always had when there wasn't milk in the fridge. I sat at the table, steam curling into the air, and thought about the path that had led me here. 40 years of labor, nights that bled into mornings, vacations skipped, dreams deferred. All so my son could walk taller than I ever could. I thought sacrifice was a ladder, and if I built it long enough, he'd climb out of the shadows. But now I wondered, did I build a ladder, or did I build a wall between us? I let my mind wander back. The first bike, the patched uniforms, the college tuition checks I mailed with shaking hands because I wasn't sure if I could cover the bills after. The phone calls where he spoke quickly, distracted, never asking how I was holding up. The subtle way he started to avoid introducing me to his friends. The sighs when I spoke too long. Signs I had brushed aside, each one dismissed as nothing. But nothing piles up, and sooner or later, nothing becomes everything. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. Each tick reminded me of years spent waiting for gratitude, waiting for recognition, waiting for something that never came. And in that stillness, I realized something painful. I had been holding my breath for decades, waiting for my son to turn back and say, "I see you, Dad." Tonight had proven that day would never come. The coffee cooled. I didn't drink it. I just sat there, staring at the photo on the mantel. Him at 10 years old, grinning in a uniform I had sacrificed to buy. I thought of the boy he was and the man he had become. And I whispered into the empty room, "Where did you go?" The answer, of course, was silence. When I finally dragged myself to bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the echo of the bride's words still ringing in my ears. "To the father of the groom." Words I had waited a lifetime to hear, spoken not by him, but by a woman who had only just entered our family. It was enough to make me wonder if family was less about blood and more about who chooses to see you when others don't. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like suffocation. It felt like truth. And I decided right there in the dark, I would no longer live invisible. The sun was sharp the next morning, spilling across the kitchen table like it had something to prove. I poured myself another cup of coffee, black again, and sat at the table where the envelope still lay unopened. I traced the crease of it with my finger, wondering whether to keep it as proof of what I had meant to say, or burn it as proof of what I would never again give. The phone rang at 9:14. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering, because some stubborn part of me still thought maybe, just maybe, it would be an apology. It wasn't. His voice came fast, sharp, stripped of its public polish. What the hell was that last night? Standing there like some poor victim, letting her humiliate me? Do you have any idea how that made me look? I stayed silent. Years had taught me silence often did more damage than shouting. "You've ruined me," he hissed. "Do you know what people are saying? At work? Online? My friends? Everyone's whispering about that damn toast. They think I told my own father to sit in the kitchen. You should have stayed out of sight like I asked." Like I asked. The words sat in my ear like acid. Finally, I spoke. "You asked me to erase myself from your life. I won't do it anymore." There was a pause, a stunned, heavy pause, as if he didn't expect me to speak at all. Then he spat. "You sound just like her. Just like my wife. I should have known she'd side with you. So that was it. The bride hadn't gone rogue. She had chosen the truth, and in his eyes, truth was betrayal. His voice rose, desperate now. "You'll regret this, old man. When you're sick, when you can't get out of bed, when no one else is there, you'll regret cutting me out. Don't think she'll stick around to take care of you. You'll die alone." I let him rage, every word like a shovel digging his own grave in my memory. When he finally fell silent, breathing hard into the receiver, I said one thing. "I'd rather die alone with dignity than live invisible with shame." The silence on the other end was louder than any shouting. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, like it was fragile. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't ache. I felt calm, almost serene, because I realized I hadn't lost him that night at the wedding. I had lost him years ago. Last night just made it clear enough for me to stop pretending otherwise. Later that day, the phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Mr. Lawson," a soft voice asked. "This is Claire. I was a guest at the wedding on the bride's side. I just wanted to tell you. I saw what happened, and I've never respected anyone more. You carried yourself with dignity. Please don't think people didn't notice." Her words reached me deeper than she could know. After we hung up, I sat there in my quiet kitchen, listening to the ticking clock, and realized something. Humiliation was not mine to carry anymore. It was his. And dignity, well, that belonged to me. By the third evening, I figured the storm might finally be quieting. I hadn't heard from him again. No calls, no letters stuffed with rage. I almost allowed myself to believe he had moved on or maybe buried the shame under that mask of charm he wore so well. Then came the knock. It wasn't his. His knock was always fast, angry, rattling the doorframe like it owed him money. This one was soft, hesitant. I opened the door and froze. There she was, his wife, the bride. No satin gown this time. No camera flashes lighting her face. Just jeans, a cardigan, her hair tied back, eyes swollen from crying. She carried nothing but a small purse, though she held it like a shield. "May I come in?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but steady. I stepped aside, and she entered as if she had been here before. She looked around at the worn furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the framed photos crooked on the mantel. Not with judgment, no, with curiosity, with recognition. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once laid down the envelope meant for my son, the same table where I'd signed checks I couldn't afford. "I owe you an apology," she began. "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For not speaking sooner," she said. Her fingers twisted in her lap. "I saw the way he spoke about you. I heard the comments, how he didn't want you to talk too much, how he worried you'd embarrass him. I should have called it out. I should have told him he was wrong. Instead, I kept quiet." "You spoke when it mattered," I said. "When it cost you something." Her eyes welled. "It did cost me. He hasn't forgiven me. He says I humiliated him in front of everyone, that I sided with you instead of him." She swallowed hard. "But he doesn't understand. Respect isn't optional. If he can't honor his own father, what kind of husband can he be?" I studied her across the table. This young woman barely half my son's age, yet already wiser in ways he had never learned. "You have a choice now," I told her softly. "You can spend your years smoothing his pride, patching over his anger, pretending not to see what's plain. Or you can stand tall, like you did that night." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are," I said. "You proved it." Her tears slipped free. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "You deserved a place at that table. He may never see it, but I do. And I want you to know, You still have family, even if it's not through him." Those words cut deeper than any insult my son had ever hurled, because they weren't just kind, they were true. When she finally rose to leave, she paused at the door. "I don't know what's going to happen with us," she admitted, "but whatever happens, I want you in my life." The porch light cast her in gold as she walked down the path. I stood there long after she disappeared into the night, the air cool on my face, my chest tight with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope lasted exactly 2 nights. On the third, just past 10, headlights swept across my curtains. A car door slammed, hard enough to shake the porch. I knew that sound. The knock came, 3 sharp pounds that rattled the frame. I opened the door only halfway. There he stood, my son. His tie loose, his hair mussed, his face flushed. Rage clung to him like sweat. "You!" he spat, jabbing a finger at me. "You've been filling her head with your martyr stories, making me out to be the villain." I stayed calm. "She came here on her own." "Don't lie to me," he snapped. "She told me she came to see you. She's been distant ever since. You poisoned her. You made her believe your sob story about sacrifices and old bills. Now she thinks I'm ungrateful." "You are," I said quietly. His face twisted. "You ruined me. At work, they whisper behind my back. Her family looks at me like I'm dirt. Do you know what it's like to lose respect because of one stupid night? Because of you?" I leaned on the door frame, steady as a wall. Respect isn't lost in one night. It's lost piece by piece when you forget who carried you here. He barked a bitter laugh. "Carried me? You weighed me down. You and your poverty, your embarrassing accent, your old clothes. Do you know how hard I worked to get away from that? To build something better?" "You didn't build it alone," I said, my voice low, even. For a moment the mask slipped. His eyes flashed something raw, almost fear. Then the fury returned. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "When you're old and useless, when no one's left to check on you, you'll wish you hadn't turned me against you." Behind him, in the car, I saw her, his wife. She sat in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, face pale in the dashboard glow. She didn't move. She didn't call out. She just watched. I met her eyes through the windshield, and for a flicker of a second, I thought I saw something in them. Resolve, distance, a decision forming. "I've been alone before," I said to him. "I can survive it again. What I won't survive is being invisible. Not anymore." His jaw tightened. He wanted to strike back, but words failed him. He spun on his heel, storming down the steps. The car door slammed. Tires squealed, rubber burning into the night as the car tore down the street. I stood on the porch, hand on the frame, breathing steady. The anger, the threats, they didn't scare me anymore. They sounded like echoes of a boy who never grew into the man I hoped he'd be. And as the taillights vanished, I whispered into the dark, "Never again." The morning after his outburst, I woke earlier than usual. Dawn was pale and thin through the blinds, but my eyes had already been open for hours. His threats had clattered around in my head all night. "You'll regret this. You'll die alone." Maybe once those words would have scared me. Maybe once I'd have bent under their weight. But lying there in the quiet, I realized something. I had already lived alone, even with his name still tied to mine. I brewed coffee and carried the mug to the small desk in the corner of my living room. The desk was cluttered. Old bills, envelopes I never mailed, pens that skipped across paper. But at the very bottom drawer sat a folder I hadn't touched in years. My will. I pulled it out, spread the pages across the desk. His name glared up at me in black ink. Beneficiary, heir, sole recipient. Every line, every clause. Every hard-earned dollar pointed to him. For decades, I thought that was the way it had to be. Parents leave their children everything. It's the circle of life, the debt we're told we owe. But as I stared at those words, I felt something shift. Leaving it all to him wouldn't be love. It would be enabling. It would be rewarding cruelty, feeding the same entitlement that had led him to slam his glass and scream at me in front of 100 guests. So I picked up a pen. My hand shook at first, but steadied as the ink flowed. I crossed his name out, not with anger, not with vengeance, with clarity. In its place, I wrote something new, a small scholarship for kids in town who wanted to study, so they wouldn't have to choose between books and groceries, a donation to the church pantry that once carried me through winters, a neighbor's daughter who shoveled my driveway every December without ever asking for payment. And, though she had only been my daughter-in-law for a handful of weeks, her name too, not for what she was by law, but for what she had shown me in courage. When I finished, I signed my name, the pen biting into the paper. My chest felt lighter. I wasn't cutting him out to punish him. I was cutting him out to finally protect myself. I sat back, looking at the amended will spread across the desk. My hands, old, scarred, calloused, rested on the wood. Hands that had carried him through boyhood, held tools and textbooks, scraped coins together for uniforms. Those hands had done their part. They deserved rest. I glanced up at the mantel. The photo of him as a boy grinned back at me, gap-toothed, hair sticking up, uniform slightly too big. My heart ached for that child. But the man he had become? That man was no longer my responsibility. I slipped the papers back into the folder, tucked it into a fireproof box at the back of the closet, and locked it. The decision was final, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. It didn't take him long to find out. 3 weeks later, I returned home from the grocery store to find an envelope jammed in my doorframe. His handwriting scrawled across the front, angry, jagged, letters uneven like they'd been scratched in fury. I opened it carefully at the kitchen table. The letter inside was short, but each word cut like glass. You think you can erase me? You think you can humiliate me twice? Change the papers back, or you'll regret it. You don't get to cut your own son out of your life. I won't let you. No dad, no love, just entitlement dressed up as threat. I folded it once, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into the drawer with the will. A record, a reminder. That night the phone rang. Not him this time, her. Her voice was soft, but tired. I think you should know. He found out. He's furious. He said he's coming to confront you. I told him not to, but he doesn't listen. Thank you, I said, for warning me. There was a pause. Then she whispered, I don't know how much longer I can stay with him. He's not the man I thought I married. But I want you to know, you're not alone in this, not anymore. Her words steadied me. Whatever storm was coming, I knew I wouldn't face it alone. The storm arrived the very next evening. Headlights flared through my curtains, bright and unrelenting. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps pounded up the porch. The knock rattled the frame. I opened the door just enough to see him. His face was twisted, jaw clenched, eyes wild. You think this is over? He snarled. You think you can cut me out like I don't exist? You owe me. After everything I've put up with, after the childhood I had to endure, you owe me. I felt something in me harden, like steel cooling into shape. I don't owe you anything, I said quietly. Not anymore. His face reddened, veins standing in his neck. You'll regret this. When you're sick, when you're weak, when you're dying. Don't expect me to be there. Don't expect anyone to be there. Better alone, I whispered. than chained to someone who calls himself a son while treating me like an inconvenience. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, words failed him. Behind him, in the car, she sat, motionless, watching, bearing witness. Finally, he turned, stomped down the steps, and slammed the door so hard the porch shook. Tires squealed. Taillights bled into the night. I stood there in the doorway, steady as a tree in a storm. His threats no longer frightened me. They sounded like the hollow rage of a man who had already lost. And in the silence that followed, I realized something else. This was not just an ending. This was a beginning. Because the moment I closed the door, I knew I had chosen myself, for the first time in a very long time. Days passed, then weeks. The phone stayed silent. No more threats, no more knocks rattling the frame. At first, the quiet felt strange, like waiting for thunder after lightning. But eventually, it began to feel like something else. Relief. Then, one late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the yard, there was a knock at my door. Not sharp, not furious, gentle. I opened it, and there she was, his wife, the bride. But she no longer looked like a bride. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, her hair pulled back hastily. In one hand she clutched a small suitcase. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside. She rolled the suitcase inside, set it by the couch, and collapsed into the chair at the kitchen table. The same chair she had sat in weeks ago when she told me I still had family. She didn't speak right away. Her hands trembled around the mug of tea I poured for her. Finally, she whispered, "I can't do it anymore." I waited, letting her find her words. "He hasn't stopped raging," she said. "Not about you, not about me. He says I betrayed him. He says I humiliated him. But the truth is, he humiliated himself. And I can't spend my life patching over his pride, smoothing over his cruelty, making excuses for him." She pressed her palms to her eyes. I tried to believe he would change. I told myself it was stress or pressure or nerves. But he doesn't want to change. He just wants control. Her voice cracked. So I left. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. "That took courage," I said quietly. She shook her head. "It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like failure." "No," I said firmly. "Failure is staying in a place where respect doesn't live. Leaving is survival." Her tears spilled over, but there was a strength in them. She reached across the table, her fingers curling around mine. "You were right. Family isn't blood. Family is who chooses to see you. I see you, Charles. And I hope you'll let me stay in your life." I squeezed her hand gently. "You already are." The suitcase by the couch said more than words. She had left him. She had chosen dignity, chosen truth, chosen not to be chained to his shame. That night, we sat in the living room, with the lamp casting warm light across the worn carpet. She told me about her childhood, her dreams, the way she had once believed marriage would mean safety. I told her about the shop, the long nights, the sacrifices. Two people from different generations, bound not by law, but by choice. And for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something new. Months later, the town still whispered about the wedding. People at the market would glance at me, some with pity, others with respect. Old friends patted my shoulder, saying, "We heard what happened. You did the right thing." The story had traveled further than I ever thought it would. But I didn't need the town's approval. I had something better. Peace. The bride, no, I stopped calling her that. She was her own woman now. She visited often, sometimes bringing dinner, sometimes just bringing herself. She helped me in the garden, carried groceries, filled the house with conversation. And in her laughter, I found something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Family that chose me. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived in the mail, legal letterhead, his name stamped across the top. I opened it at the kitchen table. It was a demand, a claim, words like inheritance, entitlement, obligation. He was trying to claw back what he thought was his. I smiled, a small, sad smile. He still didn't understand. Love is an obligation. Respect isn't inherited. And dignity isn't something you can sue for. I folded the papers neatly and placed them in the same drawer with the others. The will, the angry letters, the memories I no longer carried as wounds. A little archive of a man who finally stopped letting himself be erased. That evening, I sat on the porch with her. The sun bled orange and red across the horizon. She sipped tea. I sat quietly, watching the day end. "You don't regret it, do you?" she asked softly. I shook my head. Not anymore. Regret is for people still waiting for things to change. I know now, he never would have. She nodded, her eyes shining. I looked back at the house I had built with tired hands and endless nights. The house he had once been embarrassed of, the house he wanted to hide me in. And I whispered more to myself than anyone else. He told me to sit in the kitchen. But the truth is, I built the whole house. I leaned back, the porch creaking under my weight, and let the quiet settle. Not as loneliness this time, as freedom. And that was my last word.